Jade, and I did a video a couple of weeks ago, and at the end of it I said, are there any questions I can answer for you? So I've just gone through the comments on the video. There were quite a lot of comments, so thank you for everyone who put a nice message on there thanking me for the sharing, and just hearing your experiences was really interesting, and I hope you're all doing okay. So I wanted to answer the questions on there. The first one came from Joanna, and Joanna says, in a nutshell, I've managed to overcome some really sticky themes in my life, and I've managed to overcome them. Amazing, so happy. But ROCD is a really tricky one. What exposures did you do, or was it mainly unconditional acceptance of life? It's a really cool question, and I'm so glad that you're doing so much better. From your comment, I can see and hear that you have definitely applied loads of the tools that I used as well. And I agree, ROCD was a really strange one for me and really sticky, in the sense that I feel like with ROCD, a lot of it is closer to realistically true. So where you have these huge, colossal, out of this world themes where if you said them to them, they'd be like, oh my gosh, that would never be the case with you. You're not like that. All that sort of reassurance stuff. With ROCD, it's so much less clean cut than that, because you could end up in a compulsive cycle of talking to friends like, oh, how do I know I've married the right person? Or how did you feel when they proposed to you? Or how did you know you wanted to have kids? And they could share the same feelings as you in real life. So it's kind of like, oh, so it's just real? Well, shouldn't I leave then? And so it's just a much more normal day-to-day obsession. You know, you think about in our society, a lot of people are obsessed with their relationship anyway. You know, when you hear people dissecting every word of a message someone that they like has sent them, and checking their social media profiles regularly if they've got a crush or whatever. And so it is a naturally obsessive area for people to become all consumed with. So I think for me, that was why it was so sticky, because the is it true, is it true, is it true, would just felt so much more possible that it was real, whereas some of the other fears were just really absurd. Like deep down, once I had educated myself about OCD, I realised that it's unlikely that it wasn't. I'm just freaking out because I haven't put my microphone in, so the sound may or may not be bad. Let's just put the sound in. Voila. Who knows if that's any better? So to answer your question, what did I do to overcome ROCD? Well, you were right. The unconditional life acceptance was the biggest piece. So making peace with potentially never feeling love for my husband again was a real game changer. It was like, how many other cool things there are about our life together that I can enjoy, even if I never feel the feelings again that I've wanted to feel for him, because ROCD is stripping them away. So I think it was the biggest one, was unconditional life acceptance, making peace that maybe I don't love him, maybe I should be with someone different. That was the kind of, even if that were true, like that wouldn't be that scary. Loads of people live their life with the wrong person anyway. And also recognizing that in life, there is no perfect solution. So if I wasn't with him, perhaps in the future, I'd be really upset that I didn't stay with the person who I had children with, and the missed shared experience of that life together. And maybe if we stay together, which we are, then in 20 years, I'll regret all of the lost time with potentially somebody else that I could have been with who was amazing. So that acceptance that there is no easy route in life, there's no one perfect situation, and not doing that in a reassurance way, but doing that in a just that's reality. There's nothing you could do that would make life perfect and better, but deeply accepting that even if you are in the wrong relationship, the worst things have happened, and deciding not to engage in the conversation in your mind anymore. So that was a big area for me of kicking the compulsion of trying to work it out in my head, and just deciding that
I'm never going to know this. There's no way of knowing. And recognizing that whenever anything felt urgent, that was probably bound to be OCD. So just to leave it alone. So leaving that ruminative cycle. Now, in terms of exposures for ROCD, there are things that you can do. So, for example, with my ROCD, because I'm quite tall as a girl, I would get a bit freaked out that maybe I'm mismatched with the person I'm with because he's not tall. So, like, we don't belong in a sense, not necessarily that it's bad to be tall or short, but that we don't belong. Like, it's wrong to be like this, because I'd read some evidence that people are happier with a height difference that's relational to the gender or whatever. And so I was like, oh my gosh, we're not meant to be together. It's a genetic thing. It's wrong. This is why I feel unusual with him. And so, yeah, wearing heels with him, stuff like that would be really good exposures for that, feeling that discomfort of not belonging together and not engaging in compulsions that make me feel like we belong together, whatever that would be. I can't even remember what I would do, but just, yes, there's little things I would do, like I would kind of slouch a little bit so that I would be shorter than him and stuff like that, so that we look like we belonged. And I would assess other people's height differences as couples, working out, well, is the gap too big or is it too small, or is that the perfect height gap and they've got the same color hair and things like that. I would like match couples and be like, oh, they're happy because they've got an ideal height difference and they are perfect for one another because they've got a similar kind of look. And that was just highly irrational. So yeah, exposures around, if you can have a look at what it is that you're fearing and then build exposures around that, that'll be a really great place. And just keep doing them over and over while you also work on the irrational beliefs that you must be in love and you must be happy and you must have certainty that you're with the right person. And then Marnie says, I would need said Marnie because my family's Italian, Marnie. Marnie would love to hear more about which exposures you did and what you didn't avoid anymore. So the biggest one for me was POCD. And so I was absolutely terrified of anything to do with being around children. I was just so scared of like these upsetting, intrusive thoughts I would get. So some of the biggest exposures I did, which sound like nothing now because my whole life is like doing these things without like with joy. So I had to, I guess, sit at a park for like 15 minutes and not look away from anything and not feel like I wanted to run away. I had to walk because I couldn't walk past schools. I couldn't watch TV if it had any children in. It just become so extremely irrational. What other exposures did I do? I would go swimming regularly with my little girl, which just filled me with so much panic that for days before I would be really, really terrified. I also was really freaked out and scared about bath times with my young children a few years ago. So I was set the homework to bath them every single night for like 3 weeks. Now, bear in mind, I know a lot of people bath their kids every night anyway, and I do that now because they just get so filthy in the day. But bath time's like genuinely one of my favorite parts of the day now because it's just so fun because they just have so much fun and they just don't want to get out. But yeah, it was so terrifying at the time because I would go maybe like 3 or 4 days, maybe 5 days without bath time. And I would just, because I'd heard a doctor say, you don't have to bath them every day. You can just do wet wipe or sponges and get them to bed without the fuss. But by doing that exposure every day for 3 weeks, just after a while, it just wasn't scary. And whilst doing those exposures, being comfortable with any which thought, sensation, anything coming in, carrying on anyway, and not engaging in the thought compulsion of what does this mean? What is this? Just letting it come in, just letting it do its thing, a bit of mindfulness, and doing the exposure every day anyway, no matter what happened. What did I not avoid anymore? Basically everything. So anything that my OCD was like, do not do that, I would do. So it was a really great way to live life, was during this exposure program that I'm in, what can I do? Well, I'll just not say no to anything. So if something's scary, I'm not going to give in to it. And that's what I did. So what didn't I avoid? Yeah, literally everything, because I used to avoid everything. So I just lived life. And I also stopped avoiding like people or situations or scenarios or people's houses or spending time with other people who previously I didn't want to spend time with because it was triggering. So yeah, hope that's helpful. Miss Fish, Miss Fish, She says, I'm somewhat better, but when the dreaded "are you okay" comes in social situations, I feel panic automatically flood over me and I feel embarrassed. So the thing that sticks out to me with your comment here is the dreaded "are you okay?" You're dreading being asked, "Are you okay?" And you're kind of feeling like, oh, it's going to bring on my anxiety, it's going to bring on my panic. I would say that the work here, because I have been there myself, the work here is, I guess, shame attacks. So if you've not heard of shame attacks already, shame attacks is a thing that you can do to bring on feelings of shame on purpose, so that you become accustomed to not minding what anyone thinks of you. So for example, when I was going through what you're describing, I would go to Starbucks and I would just say oat cappuccino and a raisin cookie, like literally just like that, with like a weird look on my face. And they'd be like, oh, what size? Grande. Just like deadpan. And like not saying thank you, please, anything, just paying and walking off. And that to me, that felt like a comfortable shame attack, because you're not doing any harm to anyone, are you? You're just being really rude. So I would get some looks and I would feel myself going red, and it didn't feel nice. But it was a really great way to see that nothing actually happens when we fear these social scenarios. And I know that social anxiety is like a really big thing for a lot of people. And I think this type of activity would be really great for people with social anxiety, because once you can make peace with it, doesn't matter what anyone thinks of you. Like if you imagine a person who lives with Tourette's, like uncontrollable tics and saying inappropriate things all day, every day, and they can manage to learn to find a way to live with that. It's a similar thing. It's like, how can I make peace with anytime I'm in a social scenario, someone's going to ask me, am I okay? I'm going to have a panic attack in front of them. It's going to be really embarrassing. They're going to think I'm really weird. Like, try and figure out what's the root fear here. What is it that you think is going to happen? If your fear is they're going to think I'm weird, well, make peace with being weird. I was quite weird as a child. So I actually remember, I don't know if I was weird, but I wasn't like mainstream. I wasn't like cool. I just did my own thing. And I was a bit of a geek, I guess, and a bit of a know-it-all in school. And like kids didn't like me because I always like wanted to remind the teacher there was homework. I was that kid. And I remember feeling like a freak. I remember feeling different to everyone else. And it's like, it wasn't very nice. It was quite lonely, but like, it didn't kill me, did it? It was just the way it goes. So making peace with people thinking you're weird is probably what you want to focus on, and not being afraid to have a panic attack. And if you watch the last video that I did on fear of fear, I talk about how to make peace with these types of feelings. And then I've got an Amanda here. Amanda says, how often did you do exposures? I don't want to become compulsive. Yeah, that's a common fear as well, because you're trying to work out the exact amount that's going to be right, and that's definitely a problem. So this question, I have to be careful how I answer it, because it's a little bit reassurance seeking in itself, but I'm not going to not answer you. I'm just going to have to make sure that you see that I'm not going to tell you how often to do this, because you're not going to get clarity and certainty. Because if I say once a day, you're going to be like, for how many minutes? And if I say 20, you're going to be like, I did it for 22 minutes, is that a problem? I did it for 18, and you're going to get freaked out. But what I would say is, when you're in full-blown recovery mode, which is what I was in, where it's like, I have to do something really, like I have to put in some really hard work here to get this to shift, definitely every day. So think of it as like homework. You're going to agree with yourself when you're going to do it and how often, and you're just going to leave it alone. So whether you're in for life coaching or therapy with somebody, like they can help you to set that frequency. Try not to search too much for, that if they say, look, 3 to 5 times a week, I want you to do this. Don't say, so do you think 5 would be better? Just go, yeah, okay, 3 to 5 times, whatever, and take it away, and don't obsess over it. Just do 3 to 5 times. See how you get on. And yeah, you're going to definitely need to be doing it daily when you're in full recovery mode. And I would say, have yourself your set exposures that you're going to do each day. And then also build in everyday exposures that fall outside of that formal exposure work, i.e., don't say no to anything that scares you. Like, So say you've set yourself the exposure that you are going to, if you had harm OCD, for example, you're going to use a sharp knife every day around your family, 3 times a day cooking meals, I don't know. That's your exposure homework. You have to go out of your way to do it, but also commit to yourself that you also will take any exposure that comes your way naturally. So say someone invites you to a barbecue, but you've got contamination, germ, health, cooking fears, go anyway. Don't go, oh, well, I've done an exposure today, so I won't do that. Like, as best you can, go, brilliant, bonus exposure. Yes, I will go. Because if the only reason you're not going is OCD, that is avoidance, and that's just going to do the opposite of what you want it to do. And you don't want to become compulsive. So yeah, try and leave this question alone now, because you're going to get compulsive by trying to work out how often to do them. So like I said, 3 to 5 times a week, every day-ish, and bonus exposures when you can. And then when you start to get better, like maybe a couple times a week, just to keep yourself going, and just let life be then for a while, see how you get on. So I remember when I was starting to get really loads better, my homework was like, look, just leave it alone now for a few weeks, go live life and don't think about it so much. And then now I don't do any exposures at all, because life isn't that way anymore. If anything, if I ever felt fears creeping back in, I'd be like, wow, I need to make sure I don't avoid anything for the next few weeks, because that fear could come back in. So that's how I manage exposures today. We have another Amanda. This person's called President Amanda. So she's like the ultimate Amanda, I think. Does it genuinely get easier to leave the house? First of all, can I just say, I am so sorry that you're struggling to leave the house. That is like just horrible for me to hear. It's just not a nice, OCD is very cruel in that regard. So the fact that you're struggling to leave the house makes me feel really sad. I've definitely been there as well. And yes, 100%, yes. I think we feel like being in the house is a safe place, but in my experience, the longer that it went on, the house even started to feel unsafe. And then it's which rooms you're in, and then it's like, what can you see out the windows trigger you? And then it's like, what did you hear on the TV is going to trigger you? And then what colour on, anything can start to trigger you. And the more you box yourself in, the smaller it gets. But I am really sorry that you're in this position. Yeah, so it is like any fear, the more that we face it, the more exposure that we do, the better it's going to be. And so today, if there were periods where I didn't want to leave the house, yeah, definitely. Like the trouble with it is that it takes a long time for things to shift. So you can feel a bit hopeless for a little while, thinking, I'm not getting better, there's no point to this, but you have to keep going, because actually it can get worse for a little while. So I remember when I really went for it with exposures, I felt worse than I ever had with OCD, because I was literally like throwing myself into the fire. But I think if you can get the grit and determination to go, I'm not living like this anymore. I say this all the time, I'm not living like this anymore. Something is changing. If you get that grit, that it's like, I don't even care how bad it gets, I have to overcome this. But I think the reason people don't do that is because it's like, well, the hopeless feeling, well, there's no point anyway, I might as well just stay inside and stay in my comfort zone and be relatively happy versus absolutely terrified. What's the point of putting myself through all this when it's not working? And I totally relate to that, but you definitely can't give up, and you've got to keep going. And the more that you can get yourself out of the house in any which way, the more that you're going to start to feel normal about doing that. But I would definitely say that have a read about unconditional self and life acceptance on the OCDrecovery.com website. There's a page on unconditional self, life, and other acceptance that can really explain this better. That you can do exposures over and over and over and over again, but if you don't tackle the root of what's scaring you, then it kind of is easy for OCD to keep creeping back in. So I would definitely suggest having a little read about that. If anyone has, I'm more than happy to make this like a series type thing. Like if anyone would like to put questions below that I can answer for you. I suffered from OCD for 17 years. I've been recovered for about 2 years. And in that time, I've not experienced a single panic attack. I've definitely got a deep understanding of unconditional self, life, and other acceptance and rational thinking in order to overcome OCD. So any questions that you have for me about how I feel today, what I went through, anything at all, feel free to drop a comment below. And I will, if there's enough there, which I'm sure if you want to share with me, I will do another video with some more questions answered. I hope you found this useful. Thanks, bye.